Where did you put my makeup?
Huh?
Well, they were just talking.
All the little stuff?
So you're at the end of the war,
Over the toilet?
and you're in Kaprun, Austria.
Yeah, well, before the company was going to be transferred out of Austria at some time, they wanted to have a banquet there in a ski lodge, low-level ski lodge, just a few miles from our camp in Kaprun. And so after the banquet, any of us that wanted to could stay in the hotel accommodation up there. So Burr and I, when we went to the banquet, we were going to stay overnight, and but the purpose of the banquet was to before we left Kaprun, and before the doctor left, who had operated on Chuck Grant,
Yeah.
and Captain Spears felt that some honor should be directed to him for actually saving Chuck Grant's life, and so they had the banquet. We had a very, very nice banquet with roast beef and stuff like that.
And this was at the ski lodge?
Yeah, at the ski lodge.
Okay.
And well, they had our cooks working on it, but because the ski lodge really wasn't open then. Yeah. But anyway, at the banquet, while I was at the head table with Captain Spears and with the German doctor, who was a civilian, and had taken care of Chuck Grant in the hospital in Zelmsee, Austria. And the hospital was run primarily to take care of Luftwaffe flyers that were injured in flight and may have had head injuries and stuff like that.
And that's why they had a brain surgeon type guy there.
Yeah, and so when Chuck was shot that night, and we got him over to the hospital, which is nearby, and got him in the lobby, and then we called the doctor out, and the doctor wouldn't want to operate on him. Said there's no point in trying to operate on him. He would die in the operation from the shock of it. And then at that point, Hack Hansen, who may have been a sergeant at the time, pulled his gun on the doctor and said, "You either operate on this man or you're going to be dead." And so he threw his hands up in the air, and he said that it wouldn't do any good to operate on him because he would die in the surgery, but he's forced to do it. And so he takes him into the operating room. We sit on the floor of the lobby there.
I mean, was my dad with you at this time?
Yeah, for something like 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then the doctor came out, and he said, "I don't know how to explain it, but this man is the strongest man I ever knew in my life, and he's still alive." And so he shortly after that, while Chuck was flown to the States, that was at the time he was wounded, but several weeks later, this banquet occurred. And,
I see. Okay.
And so the doctor was apparently going to be transferred somewhere, and they felt that they should honor him for saving Chuck's life. And so anyway, they
did most of the company go to the banquet?
Yeah.
The whole company went? And like you said, but people could choose to stay the night if they wanted? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. If you wanted to stay overnight at the after the banquet, why, you could stay in the hotel there. It was a lower level ski lodge hotel. And so Burr and I had a room together up on the upper floor, and while we were there in the morning, one of the guys the hell was it, Vance?
Sorry.
I took the picture.
Oh, Don Moon.
No.
Oh,
This is a different picture.
The picture of my dad and him.
oh, was that Carson?
No,
It was somebody in Easy Company?
Yeah,
it
it was somebody in Easy Company. Was it Lieutenant?
no, I wasn't a lieutenant.
Wasn't
It
Peacock?
was,
You're right.
no, it was one of the enlisted men. That,
One of your buddies?
yeah.
You'll remember. You always do.
I'll remember.
Yeah, I'll remember eventually. But
Yeah. And so
anyway,
did you go out on a balcony or
Anyway.
something?
he took the picture of Burr and I, and then we took a picture of him afterwards. They were using my camera, and but anyway,
Everybody loves that picture. I get more emails from people that say, what was going on in their minds? I said, my dad just
Well,
looks wistful.
simultaneously with that happening, why a yell from down on the ground level came up looking for Malarkey, and so I had put my head out over the banister, and here's my best high school friend
Wow.
in a Jeep,
Wow.
and he was a liaison flyer, fly one of the little Piper Cub planes, and he and a partner would fly people around different military situations out of Salzburg, Austria, and so he'd come down there in the morning. I'd corresponded with his sister and younger sister, and she had let him know where I was, and so he'd already stopped at the company headquarters and met Captain Spears, and Spears had him in for lunch, and instead of walking in,
Did he know you were there when he?
yeah, he knew that. Yeah,
Okay.
he came to look for me, and he was getting permission from Spears to take me back to Salzburg with him, and but so Spears invited them into lunch while they were there, and of course under Spears' policy, nobody could sit down or do a thing until he arrived, and then when he arrived, why they sat down, and in the meantime, why Billy Larson and his partner, a guy named Carl Loveland, were standing up there, and officers, you know, and so eventually they got to sit down, but they when they got free, when they got talked to me, he said, "But you mean to tell me that you've been serving with that man all this time?" And that was the kind of regulations he had, and I said, "Yeah, that was it, period. That's what you had to do, whether you liked it or not." And so, but they were treated like little rookie second lieutenants of some kind, or sergeants of some kind, but because there weren't any enlisted men in here at all on the dinner. And but anyway,
But did you get to go to the dinner?
Oh, he had to.
Oh.
Yeah, he's there.
Oh.
And but anyway, when I was sitting alongside Captain Spears and the German doctor, who spoke very good English, he said, he told me, he said, "Do you remember that man that pulled the gun on me?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Is he here tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, he's sitting right out there." And he said, "Do you think that he was serious about shooting me?" I said, "Yeah, you'd be dead now if you hadn't obeyed him." Then he said, "Would you go thank him for me?"
Oh.
Because we saved that man's life,
Yeah,
and I wasn't going to do that
Yeah.
until he pulled the gun on me, and then he did. Yeah. So anyway,
You want some more? Wow. Well, now, so what did you think of Spears? Was Spears friendly to the enlisted men?
well, he liked me a lot,
Yeah.
but I wasn't quite what he was, because our nickname for Spears was Killer Spears.
Yeah.
And it's a fact of life,
Yeah.
that his job was to get rid
Yeah.
of Germans, and
Yeah.
he didn't care where they were.
Yeah.
And,
So all the stories about him are true?
The stories basically about him are true. And he continued, Spears continued in the service after the war.
Right, yeah.
And at one point, I have the book Spandau, written by Albert Speer, at home. And while I was reading Albert Speer's book, I opened it up to one of the pages that it has the agenda of the governors of Spandau, the representatives of Spandau from the different countries, and they all had to sign it, 4 of them, at the bottom, and which I think they did it every week. And at the very bottom, it said Ronald C. Spears, and oh my God Almighty, you know, Killer Spears.
Is that Spandau?
in charge of.
That must have been a fun job for
no
him.
one would believe that. So anyway, the next reunion I was at, why I told the commanding general, who had been commanding general in Vietnam, repeat his name.
Don't do that to you. Sal Matheson.
Oh,
Matty Matheson. Yeah. Well, he was a great friend of Compton's, and but anyway, Matheson would come into a company reunion and sit down, and he'd always sit in a little, like a settee couch, and he would say, "Where's George?" he would call for George Love, because he know he could get it told about 100 different jokes that George Love has never forgot one his whole life, you know. And so anyway, he and the general would sit together, you know, corporal or something in the army. But anyway, it's just a wonderful thing. But anyway.
When was that picture taken on that on the bleachers? That last picture.
Just before, that was the veranda of our room.
Oh.
Yeah, and
the picture of you and Dad was the veranda of your room.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And
in the ski lodge.
Yeah, in the ski lodge, and Billy Larson was at the Jeep down below, but the picture was taken before Billy had yelled at me, to find me, and.
But you know that picture where the company's on bleachers in the field?
Yeah.
That's in Caproon, right?
That's Caproon. That's the last company picture.
And is that, somebody asked me, because I was there in September, is there like a little castle across the street? Do you remember that?
Well, there's really nothing left to it.
Yeah, right. And there's like 2 kind of chateau, not chateaus.
Yeah, there's really nothing left to it. And
because that was kind of spooky to see that.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
The bleachers were still there.
No, the bleachers were there, but just to see the field, and I could see the roof line of the house that was in the picture that they're in. The roof is still there.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, it was neat. It was really cool. So that was after the banquet? That was the last day you were all there?
Yeah, that was after the banquet. But it could have been a day or 2 before, really, because I had just left almost immediately for Paris. And whereas the company was going to be there several more weeks before they left, and but I was sent by the division to Paris as a technical advisor for the airplanes that were under the Eiffel Tower that had been brought in.
Was that sort of a reward for you, of sorts, to send you to Paris? Or did
it was probably because of my appearance.
Because you were so handsome?
Yeah, because I was so damn good looking.
I bet you were. You probably cleaned up nice in a dress uniform.
Yeah, Susan probably has heard this story from you before.
Yeah.
But tell her about being, after you got out of the hospital, and you sitting in that bar, and the trolley car coming down the street.
Well, that would be a good one to take.
Yeah, well.
And when was that?
It was just before the war ended. I'd been evacuated off the Rhine River with what stupid American battalion doctors had diagnosed with me to be malaria. And I had some kind of a flu bug, and but it had some symptoms like malaria, I guess, or sweating and cold and one thing or another. And George Luz came and saw me on my bunk, and he said, I'm going to go get Captain Spears. You're going to get out of here. I said, I don't have to get out of here. I'll be all right. And so he goes and gets Spears, and Spears looks at me, and he said, you're getting out of here.
What city were you in? Where were you when this was?
We're on the Rhine River.
Oh, okay.
Across from the Ruhr Pocket in Germany.
Okay.
The last area that we occupied.
Okay.
And so I was sent to Liège, and it was about the 6th, around the 6th of June or so, not June but May, no, April or May. And 2 days after I left, the division left for Germany. So I wasn't with them, and they left for Germany. I was in the hospital. I had been released before the end of the war, and I was sent to a redeployment camp in Verviers, Belgium, east of Liège, Belgium. And so when I was at this camp, you had to wait there until they identified where your unit was, and then tried to figure out how to get you from one place to the next. But while I was at Verviers for 2 or 3 days, Frank Perconti came walking down the road. I was sitting at a sidewalk bar, and drinking a beer, and he'd been hit in Bastogne, and he had just been released out of England and going back to the unit. And so I yelled at him, and he came and sat with me, and so we were drinking beer, and then the next thing you know, Frank says, there's a trolley that ran up and down the street. Frank says, look who's up on that trolley. And so up on the very top of it, on the very top front of it, sits Burr. So we yelled at him, and off of there he jumps off of there, comes down and puts his arms around us. And
well,
so
what was he doing there? What on earth?
Well, he was coming out of the hospital too, and so anyway, we spend all afternoon out there in the lobby. I mean, in the sidewalk cafe, and then when it got dark, we walked inside the end of the bar, and the three of us were standing there, and all of a sudden, Frank could see some guys standing outside the window looking in, and Frank says, he said, look out the window there. And I said, yeah. He said, isn't that guy Jeter or Jeter or something? And I said, no, I don't know, is he? He wasn't in my platoon, but he was in Frank's platoon, and Sobel had kicked him out because Sobel had thought originally he was Jewish, and then he found out he wasn't. So he got mad about that, so he kicks him out of the company. And so finally this guy came in with two friends, and they stood about 5 or 6 feet away from us, and he's telling these friends of his, he said, see, there are 3 of those crazy guys I was telling you about in Toccoa, Georgia.
Oh, wow.
We'd all survived.
I've heard him tell the story before, but I never made the connection with the guys that were pointing at you.
Huh?
I said, I've heard you tell me the story before, but I never made the connection with who those guys were. Oh, wow. How funny. Where were you in Foy? What did you do?
I was in charge of the 2nd platoon, as platoon leader. And
so first went down. First went down first, right?
But I was sent west of Foy, and to loop around and to come in from the west side, which I did. And I got up to a gated area, not a gated area, but a rock wall area, looking down into Foy, probably 250 yards away or so. And as I was standing down there looking for a machine gun target or something, and I had called a mortar gunner up alongside me, and I don't even know what his name was because they were added to the group that I had because the second platoon was gone, just about gone. And so as we were standing there looking down into Foy, a German machine gun whipped off and got this guy 5 or 6 shots through the chest, and no medics that you could get near him. You could see out in the orchard area ahead of us, Eugene Rowe running all over hell in the snow of the orchard, treating guys that were down, and so there were no aid for the guy at all, and he just died of quite quickly from the wounds. Then from then on, we got into the western side of the town, and as I got right pressed into the last building that I had to get around by, I had some of these guys in front of me, and around to the side, and so I sent a corporal and 3 or 4 guys around the side of the building, on the right side of a building, and then I told the guy behind me, I said, you cover me while I run out into this open area. And he said, Sergeant, you're in charge of this outfit. You're not supposed to be running into anything. And he said, I'll go. And he stuck his neck out there and was killed just like that. And then I jumped out with a Tommy gun, and a young German was in a window, an open window area in another farm building, and still standing with his gun. And I killed him with my Tommy gun from there. And then that really the ended it for the Foy. And so then I went into the last other building that was there, and there had been a lot of wounded guys that had been taken in there, and so I ran in to see if there were any more Germans around, and they said no, they're all either dead or wounded or surrendered or wherever. And then while I'm standing there, I run out and back out, and I run into an officer named Gene Brown that I'd known at the University of Oregon, but I hadn't seen him since before the war, really.
It's just amazing that you would run into these people in such different circumstances.
Yeah. And anyway, when I first met this Gene Brown, at the time then he was a captain. He'd been in a line company for about a week, and then was transferred out of it to a regimental staff. So he hadn't been a combat officer, but he'd been assigned to another company, and that was called in support of E Company as they made that attack and got hit bad. And so he was in the middle of Foy, as I was in that little town, and I came out of that last building and ran right into him. He reprimanded me when I first saw him the very first night that I was in Toccoa, Georgia. And when I went to get my mess kit washed and inspected, I looked up and he was the officer in charge. And I said, "Hi, Gene, how are you?" And he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, "Well, hi, Don." And then about 3 weeks later, I got the first 3 or 4 hour pass that I could get to go into downtown Toccoa. And so there were 3 or 4 of us went together. Skip was one of them, I'm sure. And as we were walking along in a little one-horse town in Toccoa, we run into this group of officers, and this Gene Brown was in the group. And I saluted him, and I said, "Hi, Gene, how are you?" And so I walked past him, and he said, "Soldier, I want to talk to you a minute." So I turned around and I went with him, and he took me in a store building, closed up store building, and he said, "Don," he said, this is the Army. You can't be addressing me as you have been, and if you continue to do that, you'll disrupt me from any possibility of making myself ahead in this outfit. So you got to quit doing that. And he said, this is the Army. Well, I had flunked ROTC at Oregon, so it was no surprise to me that that I didn't know the regulations at all. But anyway, just by the same coincidence, we served in the same battalion the entire war. But I never saw him again until that day in Foy.
Wow.
And but after that, why, we were like, I never had to salute him or do a damn thing. And so when the war ended and I was in France, I stayed with Buck Compton. And while I was sitting in Buck's office, as I had moved into Paris, and Buck said, you come and live with me, in my apartment on the Seine, which I did. And so anyway, I'm sitting in there, and it wasn't the same day, but I think it was the next day, why another officer came walking in to see Buck, and it was Gene Brown. And so I said, hi, how are you? And from that point on, I never had to say sir or yes sir or sir or what sir. But he said I want to take you and Buck to dinner tonight. And so he'd made a lot of money gambling in the company with the regimental commander. Sink. Sink had command performance gambling games at his headquarters, and Gene Brown would always be invited, and he was a competitive bridge player, and so they gambled on everything, and he won a lot of money. And so anyway, he wanted to take, I want to take you and Buck to dinner tonight. So we met him at a low-level cafe along the Champs-Élysées, and went in there and had dinner. And in the course of dinner, we did a lot of yak and stuff like that. And so then when we get out at dinner, we're standing up on the Champs-Élysées, and Gene says, I want to buy you two guys a girl.
You don't be embarrassed.
So Buck said no thanks, and I said no thanks, and so that was the end of that. But he had a lot of money that he could have spent, and he wanted to do something nice to us.
Yeah, I was trying to get you to not say that, but yeah.
Come on.
Say what?
I'm just teasing you.
It's an okay story.
Yeah.
I like it.
There wasn't anything wrong with that, for God's sake.
They said no.
The girls in Paris were professionals, licensed professionals.
Oh, that makes a difference.
Well, it does with them,
That was their job.
Okay.
There's nothing illegal about it over there.
Of course not.
No, they make a lot of money.
Maybe
Do I
that's
push
what
the red button to turn it
You
off?
Actually, yes. Maybe that's
Bye,
what I
Don.
When Burke came into the company, he had come out of a military school
Right.
in California,
Right.
and he was a demonstrating expert on doing some fancy things with the rifle and the manual of arms and stuff. And the funny part about it, later in reunions, Clarence Hester, he was a colonel then, he would call Burr out, as civilians, for Burr to put a demonstration on, as he used to do in Toccoa.
He was that good.
He was that good, you bet. Yeah, you bet he was. Wonderful, just wonderful.
His parents